All vote, we determine our future.
Good evening and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. Man, what a week it's been. uh, from the pipe bomber to what happened at the Kroger in Kentucky to the synagogue in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's been a trying week, and I've just been trying to process all of this and understand what's going on. And I think, the only way to deal with this is kind of to talk it out. A lot of people have, expressed shock and dismay at the turn of events, but I kind of anticipated it. The rhetoric has been very high coming from the right, and I've written a couple of blog posts this week and talked about how I felt about the way the right just has dealt with this particular issue. So um, I know that I'm going to need some expert advice on how to deal with my trauma, and so to help me deal with my trauma, as always, I'm happy to have Val Atkinson in with us tonight to talk about what's been going on this week. Val, welcome back to the deal.
Thank you, Ed. Pleased to be here.
So, Val, help me here. You know, Rhetoric is one thing, but when people start to take action, and let's just start at the top. The main story at the beginning of the week was the pipe bomber. There was an all-out effort to find this guy who had, been mailing things to people who oppose President Trump, particularly Democrats, past President Barack Obama, to Hillary Clinton, to all the way to James Clapper and to CNN. Um, the response from the president was not what I guess is what I was expecting, but not what should have happened. Let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about the pipe bomber first, and that first reaction from the president. What your thoughts are on that?
Well, the first reaction from Mr. Trump was exactly what I had anticipated. Uh, before he makes any reaction, before he does anything, I think he takes it through the filter of how is this going to play with my base? And he can't afford, in his mind, to be too soft, to be too apologetic when he's dealing with a hardcore base. So I expected him to come out as he has. The only time he may sound semi presidential is when he's reading from the teleprompter, meaning someone else has written that and he's reading it word for word verbatim. But when he goes off script and he is talking from his heart, we find out who the real Donald Trump is. And it's not a caring person. It's
Mm.
not a person who would try to bring uh, competing sides together for the sake of the nation. It's Trump and all of his vile, I don't know, anger and selfishness and his meism, and nothing else seems to matter. And this is about 180 degrees from what we really expect out of the president of the United States.
Right. Now, so let's move to the second story that emerged this week, and I think got the least amount of play for a particular reason. I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, but in Kentucky, two African American people were killed. They were in Kroger shopping, and the only reason why more people didn't get killed is because this particular criminal went to a church, could not get in, and found the first two black people he could kill. And that was in Jeffersontown, Kentucky. And even as I've heard some of the coverage of some of the other stories, there's not as much talk of what happened in Jeffersontown. Why is that? You're also a professor of media studies and media and politics. Why is that story not getting the type of coverage I think it should?
Well, let's go back to Darlin Roof. When he went into that sanctuary in South Carolina and killed 9 people, one of the things that they discovered in their investigation after the murders was that he wanted to start a race war. Uh, the media has determined that they will not be a party to anyone using them or someone else trying to start a race war. So if you take a look at what the media does and how they do it, if it appears that some vile act may be the start of something close to a war between the races, they downplay that. They don't want to give it, as we call it in the media, they don't want to give it legs. They downplay it. And that's my opinion why they didn't talk too much about this second issue of this man looking for a church and settling on two other African Americans. And it was a time to switch when the synagogue murders came online. But the media does not want to start anything that may resonate with the general public as, oh, here we go. This is going to be a second Civil War.
Right. Well, so now let's go to Pittsburgh. Let's talk about what happened there. A gunman who obviously his whole motivation was to kill Jews. He said he didn't support Trump because Trump wasn't hard enough on Jews. He had too many Jews around him, and 11 worshippers were killed. By all accounts, of course, all the media I've seen says that it's the greatest single event of Jewish people being killed in the United States, as far as anybody can tell, even though there's been a rise in anti-Semitic crime since the 2016 election. Talk to me about what happened in Pittsburgh, and I really want to get to the dichotomy of there are people on the right who are anti-Jewish, but at the same time, there's this thing on the right also about the state of Israel and support for the state of Israel. What happened in Pittsburgh and why?
Great question. And I'm glad you asked that, Ed, because one of the things in trying to unpack all of this about Pittsburgh and the Jews is something that Michelle Obama talked about, and I've been trying to echo on this show, Ed, for the last couple of times we've been on. And, you know, we've been trying to tell people to vote and get the powers that be to understand that we will vote every time. That's where you get your power. Now, what the Jews have done over the hundreds of years that we've been here as a nation, they have managed to impress upon the powers that be that they are very powerful economically. They will support their own. They have money. If they support you, you can do great things. So now we jump off the middle ground and jump right into the fire when something happens to Jews. Trump immediately came out and said it was horrible, it was wrong. I'm coming to Pittsburgh to share and to give my condolences. And of course, there was some that said, stay home, don't come. But he even lowered the flags by half mast. That is because of the power, the wealth of the Jewish population here. But at the same time, we find that old guard racists and old guard anti-Semites still haven't found themselves able to look at their Jewish brethren as a fellow American, and they look down upon them for some reason. They support the state of Israel, however, for military strategic reasons. There's oil there. There's an ally there. There's someone there amongst our enemies that we can call on to help fight. So it's two different issues here. The Jewish person you may find as a next door neighbor or a shopkeeper here at home, and the Jewish person that you find holding down the state of Israel and all of those other Arab states that surrounds her. Mm-hmm. So it's a dichotomous kind of position that at the same time, a lot of these right wingers have a love-hate situation as it refers to Jewish people, as far as the state and individuals are concerned.
Yeah, well, I have a third theory, Val. I have a video. I'm gonna see if it'll play, and I want you to take a look at it. You haven't seen it yet. This is from HBO, Vice, and let's see if we can play this video.
Okay.
This may be the most important prophetic spot in the entire Bible because the final act of the book of Revelation is going to begin right here at this place. The Bible teaches that Russia, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, Turkey, and other nations will come down under a UN flag and they will invade Israel at this particular point. Can you imagine?
So Val, that's the third group of people. There are some evangelicals who are looking for the end of time. That spot where the pastors is right there is supposedly where Armageddon's going to occur, and some people actively want to bring on Armageddon. There's a third group in there on the right that I think even more dangerous, right? Because they want to see the end of the world. I mean, this minister is serious about him wanting to bring about the end of times. I know it's not the majority of the people. The strategic reasons you talked about, some of the other things probably carry more weight. But what about these evangelicals? Aren't they the ones who always vote?
Yes, they do, and they have surprised me, Ed, more than any other group that we've encountered during these election times, because they have been in the past a single issue voting bloc. They normally get involved on things like abortion and sometimes same-sex marriages. They have expanded their issues now to include every single solitary thing that's under the sun politically that Republicans and right-wingers support. They find themselves supporting, even when it seems to contradict some of their places. And one of the things that you'd want to ask some of these evangelical right-wingers is, what about this thing about helping the least of us? Or what about helping those who can't help themselves? They find it very difficult, and they don't like to talk about those kind of things because it's different than some of the Wall Streeters that they're in bed with, some of the people, the one percenters as we call them now, and they have a hard time dealing with that because their scripture says it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And they have hard times explaining that. So
Yeah.
the bottom line is, for those who watches it very closely, they know that Republican right-wingers do what is necessary for the evangelical movement, their tax statuses, to keep them doing what they do without interference from the media, from left-leaning people, and to help them carry out their positions against same-sex marriage and abortion.
Yeah, I want to remind the viewers and listeners that you're watching The Deal on thedealwithedclark.com. We're lucky to have Val Atkinson, our resident political science professor, to tell us all things political, but also media, and to explain what's going on in the world. It's been a crazy week in the United States. If you want to join us, the number is down at the bottom, 833-255-7171. When you call in, remember, you got to turn off or go away from your computer. You'll hear it through the phone. So the last few weeks, Val, as we've been starting this program out, I guess it's hard to figure out. They're trying to listen and look at themselves at the same time. Once you're online, you can hear the show. You don't have to worry about looking at the screen, and we'll get to you. So the number's down at the bottom, 833-255-7171 if you want to join. You can also send us a tweet at Fire Films. That's with a Z. And we'll be glad to entertain your questions or comments. But, so we dealt with the really, really ugly news of the week. I mean, 13 people dead. Could have been scores more dead because these bombs were sent through the U.S. mail. right? Postal facilities were in jeopardy. People handling the mail that delivered the packages, so on and so forth. So now the president has doubled down though on his campaigning. He never stopped campaigning at all. He continued to do events. Again, the sensitivity of the president and how he deals with national tragedies is not Barack Obama. I'm not expecting a Amazing Grace moment from Donald Trump, or I'm not even expecting a moment like George Bush in 9/11, right, going to the World Trade Center.
Right.
Why does he not seem to be able to do that compassionate person in chief role as well as some of the other past presidents?
Donald Trump has never in his life exhibited the type of behavior that is required of a person holding office at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He's not presidential. He doesn't know how. And coming into this office, Ed, it's my belief, along with many, many others, that he made a decision that he was not going to try to be presidential because he could not. He was going to be something different, and he was going to explain that the reason he was being something different because that's what his base wanted. Even if his base didn't want that, that's what his base was going to get because that's all he knows. He's a 70-year-old man, and he's never known anything other than getting his way through bullying people, through lying, and just having his own reality. And that's all he knows. So to expect anything else from Donald Trump is folly. You're not going to get anything else. Whether he resigns next week or next year, or he's defeated when he tries to run for a second term. However long he's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, what you see now is what you get. Nothing's going to change.
So there's 7 days before the midterm elections. And like I said, he's in full campaign mode. He almost has a stop every day where he's going in. And some of these districts are red districts that you don't think the person would need any help. So my theory is that the president is trying to throw some of these other issues at the wall to see what would stick. One of the main ones is this whole notion of this caravan that's coming from Central America through Mexico. They're still 2 months away. They're not going to be here by election day, and they're not a threat. But how does it help the president? And by virtue of helping the president, help those candidates that are running for House? Because I think the president needs those people in the House. One, not to be impeached. Two, not to have investigations against him. What's this whole thing about this caravan? Is there any meat to it, and why should we even be concerned about the caravan?
It's a diversion. Donald Trump is a master at the art of diversion. Donald Trump learned early on during the campaigning days that he controlled the media. That's why he tweets at 2:30 in the morning. He knows that any and everything he says, some media outlet, if not all of them, are going to be there to play exactly what he says. It's free media. It's free advertisement. It's having his own bullhorn, his own megaphone right at his side to give out his thoughts and ideas to the world whenever he chooses to. And he's using the American media to do that. The so-called enemies, MSNBC, CNN, whatever you want to call them, they are there carrying his message. Whatever he wants to say, they carry that for him free of charge. So he knows that's the way to get things done, and he's using it to distract people from unfortunate, uncomfortable circumstances. Something comes up that he doesn't like, he'll do something different. He'll cause another issue. That's why his concentration now is, of course, on immigration. He thinks that's a winner for him. And talking about sending the 82nd Airborne Division, which is based right here in North Carolina at Fort Bragg, sending them to the border is also a piece. You know, a lot of people support Republicans and right wingers because they think Republicans are strong on national defense. Well, he's poking that little bad ass. Let's talk national defense a little bit. Send the 82nd Airborne Division down to the border. He's doing whatever he can to distract people away from things and to make it possible that maybe a few more of his base will show up to the poll. That's the strategy here, to get more of his base out to the poll to vote.
Okay. Val, I think we have a call. The screener is screening the call now. As soon as that's up, we'll try to get them in. In the meantime, I went back and did some research, prior to the show today, and let's try to take this caller and see what they have to talk about tonight. Caller, you're on the air. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Hi, Ed. Hi, Val.
Hello.
It's nice to put faces to the voices that I listen to on Foxy every other Sunday.
Okay.
But I really appreciate you all, doing this because it's really educating me and it's keeping me in the loop. When you watch the news, they report to you what they want to report to you. Like I didn't even know about the brother and the sister that was killed in the Kroger. They were killed, correct?
Yeah, they died. Yes,
wow.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just been so on the hush. So you wonder why they run certain stories but keep others, very quiet. And another thing I read, I think I read it today, about how the Muslim community just outpoured, the Jewish community with charity and money, I think it was, and just really ran to their aid. I thought that was so wonderful. How they want to paint the Muslim community as terrorists and just opposite of everything that they really are, So it's sad. That's why I appreciate you guys, putting the real news out there. But I'm concerned, like, how do we mobilize everybody? I haven't heard anybody talking much about voting. That needs to be topic number one. We need to be talking about that all day. I feel like we're in a state of emergency, but almost like we're walking around like zombies. I don't know if we're just so discouraged or what's in the air, but to me, I don't feel that people are really motivated to vote like they should be.
Well, caller, that's a great call, Val. She makes a lot of great points there. So here's the question. Why does it not seem that people are energized like they're supposed to be? I keep seeing these polls. We talked about polls a little bit last week in saying that, the number of people going to early vote is not what they expect in North Carolina. I know a lot of people who voted, but probably not enough. What's the deal with people and their enthusiasm despite all the stuff that's happening?
Depends on the poll that you take a look at, and I want to thank the caller for calling in, and thank you for listening every other Sunday on Foxy 107, 104. But the polls are different. There was one poll out of Charlotte that said that the early voting was almost double this year over what it was in 2016. And that is phenomenal. If that poll is correct, I think that bodes well for the Democratic side of the House. So it depends on which poll we're talking about, exactly the location, what the history of that has been, of that area that is being reported on. So the jury is still out on that. I have not voted yet because I want to get the feel and the flavor on election day. I plan on voting very early at my polling place, and then I'm going to be riding around to the various key polling places in the Triangle area to get a sense and a feel for how long the line is and what kind of mood the people are in, doing what I can do to help out in those key precincts around the Triangle area.
Well, I hear you. I'm going to be voting tomorrow. So, and I've been getting messages from friends the last few days who've gone to do early voting, and all I can do is, no matter what your position is, if you don't vote it, you don't really have a say. So I always tell people that voting is the only option. If you want to complain, then if you had a vote and you participated, then you can. If you if you didn't, you can't. So, so I want to thank the caller for calling in. A really good call. I appreciate that. If you want to call in, 833-255-7171 is the number to call. We'd love to have you in. Talk about anything you want to talk about. Obviously, we couldn't go anywhere without talking about the three tragedies that happened in the last week. Val, we left talking about this whole immigration thing, but it's not something new for the president. He actually, in 2015, when he first came out of the gate, started talking about immigration. I got another video I want, again, you haven't seen this one either. This is from 2015. And let's see if we can cue that up and tell me what your thoughts are.
You are going to love me in terms of immigration.
Mr. Trump now has a plan, if that's what it's called.
Trump now arguing the United States should revoke the citizenship of people born here to undocumented immigrants, going a step further than his earlier proposal to end birthright citizenship for such children.
So Val, so that shifts us to a whole new discussion. Today, the president said that he was going to do an executive order and end birthright citizenship, and directly attacking the 14th Amendment and the provision in the 14th Amendment that says if you're born here, you're a citizen. I think it's been clear, there have been court cases on it, but I even went back and looked in 2011, Lindsey Graham actually came out with a video where he questioned whether or not that was the right policy. Now we know that Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump are best buddies now, and they can't seem to get enough of each other, and they seem to be together on this not allowing birthright citizenship. Again, you're the expert here, so I'm going to defer to you. Talk to me about the 14th Amendment basically first, and then let's just talk about the birthright. Tell everybody what the 14th Amendment is and what it was supposed to do.
Well, first of all, before you talk about the 14th Amendment, let's go back to the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. And then many folks who wanted to help ameliorate the situation of enslaved people knew that, okay, they're free, but what do we do with them? Technically speaking, they were not American citizens. So the 14th Amendment was fashioned to say that there's a few clauses in there. One that talks about equal protection under the law, which most lawyers use right now for an assortment of reasons, equal protection under the law. But initially, the 14th Amendment came out to talk about people being born here in the United States are natural citizens of the United States. And it was primarily directed toward the enslaved population here. But it was for everybody. If you were born here, you were a U.S. citizen. Now, what Trump has decided to do is this is going to be, in his mind, a mechanism to manage the immigration problem that he has. And he's not going to be able to do that simply because the 14th Amendment is part and parcel of the Constitution of the United States. Even the Supreme Court can't help him here. The Supreme Court cannot declare portions of the Constitution unconstitutional. He doesn't seem to understand that. That can't happen. What he does have the authority to do, he can declare martial law. The Constitution gives him that right. And in declaring martial law, he can suspend certain parts of the Constitution. Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, meaning you didn't have to have a reason to arrest anybody. You didn't have to tell them what they were being charged for, and you didn't have to stipulate how long they were going to be held. That's suspending all of that. He even threatened to arrest and jail the chair or chief of the Supreme Court of the United States, the Chief Justice. And he could have done that had he chosen to do so. So martial law is a possibility in times of national emergency. And he's the one that can determine that. He can have his CIA and his FBI and all the other intelligence agencies trump up charges, not unlike the bail pigs and other things. You can trump up anything you want and declare martial law. Then he can say, we got to, forget about habeas corpus. No more people that are, if you were born in the United States, but your parents weren't, then you are not a citizen of the United States. You can't get, and all you got to do is do it temporarily, meaning that you can't exercise those rights, meaning that you can't vote.
Right.
They're not going to deport you right away. That'll be a long, drawn out process, but you can't exercise the rights to vote until this thing is settled. And I can see something like that possibly going to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court could rule, no, Donald Trump cannot pass an executive order to take away the citizenship of these people permanently, but he can, in an executive order, temporarily refuse their privileges as a citizen because of the national emergency that we find ourselves in.
Well, so
I tell you, this is no joke. This is very serious, people.
That's extremely scary, Val. I mean, and I guess it points out why the fight over Justice Kavanaugh and Gorsuch was such a big deal. Is that there's consequences to who's on the Supreme Court, and I think people were short-sighted when they went to vote for President Trump, not realizing what the full implications were. I got one other clip I want you to take a look at, and this time this is from this morning, or actually from last night. President Trump sat down with HBO and the Axios folks at HBO, and this is his explanation of what he can do.
On immigration, some legal scholars believe you can get rid of birthright citizenship without changing the Constitution.
With an executive order.
Exactly.
Right.
Have you thought about that?
Yes.
Tell me more.
It was always told to me that you needed a constitutional amendment.
Right.
Guess
14th
what?
Amendment.
You don't.
You don't.
Number one, you don't need that. Number two,
that's in dispute.
You could definitely
That's very much in dispute.
Well, you can definitely do it with an act of Congress, but now they're saying I can do it just with an executive order. Now, how ridiculous! We're the only country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and it has to end.
Have you talked about that with council?
Yeah, I have.
So where in the process?
It's in the process. It'll happen.
So at the end there, he said it will happen, and he's talked to counsel. But let's backtrack a little bit. There's a lot of things in there that weren't even true. So again, give me your scholarly view of what he said there. What's true in there, and what's actually possible based on what you know.
Or what is true? He can have an executive order. Executive orders can be challenged in court. And of course, the Supreme Court has the final say, and they will make a decision as to whether his executive order is constitutional or not, whether or not it can be upheld. And I think Trump and his supporters and backers now are thinking that once they get to the Supreme Court with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, that they're going to have the votes needed to do whatever they want to do. It's not just that easy, though. What his folks are telling him is partially true, that he can write an executive order, but it's not so easy that it can be carried out, because people can take him to court and stop it right away, file for an injunction on that action that he's trying to take, and stop it until the courts can make their decision. And we just don't know how that's going to be decided in the Supreme Court yet.
So Val, the bottom line here, let's get the brass tacks. I mean, again, I think this is part of the overall strategy of trying to gin up, his voters. And to try not to pay attention to what happened last week. Again, these people are 2,000 miles away. They're nowhere near the border. If he sends troops to the border, we haven't talked about this, but isn't there a problem with just sending troops to do a border action like that? I mean, I thought that there had to be, for troops to be involved, they can't do policing actions. They're there for war and not to, police people for immigration reasons. My concern is that they're not trained for that. One, I'm afraid somebody may get shot. Now, I do remember back in April when we had a similar situation, nothing really happened, nothing materialized. I think 14 people ended up, kind of showing up and there was no big, to do about it. But what about this whole notion that he can even send troops in the first place? I know he's already said they're on the way. They're probably there if they're not on the way already. Can the president send troops to do a border patrol action? Don't we have a border patrol?
Sure, he can send troops. He is the commander in chief of the United States military, all branches. And he can decide whenever he wants to send troops to the border. But understand, they'll be on our side of the border. If he tells them to cross over into Mexico, he is invading that country. That's something he will not do. With all of the rhetoric aside, he will not invade Mexico because that will bring on Russia, China, a lot of other people into the mix. The United Nations, for him to invade a sovereign country without provocation is against UN charters and a lot of other things, not to mention Americans in the street protesting. I don't know what else will happen. You got to understand there's a lot of people. Just look at the 82nd Airborne Division. There are a lot of people in the 82nd Airborne Division that are real Mexican citizens. Join the military to take advantage of the green card option, we used to call it in the military, where you can go in and serve a certain amount of time and secure your citizenship through that process. Now you're asking them to go to the border and shoot their cousins and aunts and nieces, that is problematic. Trump is about the business of bluffing and showing. Nothing better could happen for him, Ed, than to send troops to the border and have those people from Middle America come to the border and turn around and go back. He claims victory. I showed them who is the boss. I showed force, and they don't want to have anything to do with that. And if they decide to try to cross into the United States of America illegally, then he can feel like he is within his rights to defend the borders and ask them to stop. And if they don't stop, he can use deadly force.
And that's what I'm afraid of. Yeah. I'm afraid of an incident where somebody crosses, or either our troops, cross into Mexico and start an international incident, and then, we're off to a whole nother thing. I have one last clip for tonight, Val, and this is, I thought, interesting. This was last night on Fox News, and Shepard Smith seems to be the only rational person over at Fox News. Tell me what you think about what Shep Smith had to say about this.
The U.S. will deploy some 5,000 troops to the southern border as early tomorrow as thousands of migrants make their way north from Mexico. Tomorrow. The migrants, according to Fox News reporting, are more than 2 months away, if any of them actually come here. But tomorrow is 1 week before the midterm election, which is what all of this is about. There is no invasion. No one's coming to get you. There's nothing at all to worry about.
That's exactly what I meant, is that this is for show. This is for his base, the base who likes uber militarism and all of these kinds of things. He knows what he's doing. He's thinking this is going to get him a few more thousand votes, that somebody's going to say, I wasn't going to go to the polls at one, but Trump's really doing it now. He's really telling them Mexicans where to get off, and I like what he's doing. I'm going to go to the poll and vote. That's why he's doing it. Right. As Smith says, You know, the marches are months away, but the election is exactly 7 days away.
Exactly 7 days away, and which is the whole point we've been trying to do. This is the reason why we're doing this special edition of The Deal on Tuesday nights. We're all politics all the time. Obviously, after the election season is over, we'll get back to doing what we normally do. Sometimes we'll have guests in an interview, but right now we're trying to tell you about what the issues are and why it's important to vote. Sometimes some of these things everybody doesn't watch Fox News. I had to watch Fox News last night, Val, so our folks could see what the other side is saying. I think what's really important about also what Shepard Smith said is that this has been ginned up to such a degree that a man decides he's going to walk into a synagogue because he believes that these people are invading the country, that they're being supported by Jews, and he needs to kill any Jew. If he was so brave, why didn't he go to the border and stop them? Why did he go to Pittsburgh, where these people, by all accounts, they're all elderly, right? He doesn't know if they're actually involved in any of the support for the immigrants. There's a group called HIO, Hebrew Immigration Aid, who's been helping some of the immigrants, but they go back all the way to when Jews first came to the United States, you know, right before World War II, to help immigrants come into the country, but they've helped other immigrants. This whole notion of this invading horde is a problem. So I think we got another call, Val. Let's the screen that call. As soon as we get that up, I'll bring it in. But talk to me real quick about the whole anti-Semitic thing in the right and why it's been so persistent, even in the age of Trump, where, you know, you would think that, you know, he obviously has a Jewish son-in-law. His daughter converted to Judaism. Steve Mnuchin is, Jewish, but he still found a way to make people on the right think he's on their side.
Well, you go back to Cohen, Michael Cohen. I don't know what his religious or cultural faith is or assignment is, but he shares a surname with a lot of Jewish people. I have friends, a lot of Jewish people whose last name is Cohen. And we know that he allowed Cohen to get very close to him and handle his money and do a lot of other things. So Trump has a way of allowing certain people to get close to him. And the base understands that and supports that. But at the same time, they can go out and dislike individual Jews. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Well, Val, let's try to go to a caller. We have a caller on the line. Let's see if we can bring that caller up.
Okay.
That caller, you're
Hello.
on The Deal. Good evening.
Hello, Ed, and hello, Val.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm glad I remembered your show tonight. It's first time, and it's pretty good. Of course, it's got my hackles raised. Yeah. Look, there's so much to talk about, but the main thing I want to talk about just for a moment is 45 himself. Two things. Well, a couple things. One, the old adage is, how do you know when an addict is lying? It's whenever he opens his mouth. And I think that can be applied to 45. This whole thing right now, it's all politics. And it's mainly just red meat for his base. I don't know if he's smart enough to really realize what he's doing, or if he's just dumb enough and really doesn't know. But I know that it pays dividends to him for his base. It's red meat for him. I mean, this thing of we're the only country that gives birthright citizens. I looked it up this afternoon and I saw 30 of them that do. Yes, they're all here in the West, except Fiji, which is kind of strange. But still, his base, they won't look it up. They won't mind. They'll take what he says. And I think, for the lack of a better term, that's genius on his part, how he draws them in. Otherwise, again, there's so much stuff to talk about. Philly, Kentucky, everything. But, bombing, but that alone, right now, him lying, it drives me crazy. Thank goodness I have Medicare and a good therapist. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thanks,
All right.
Paul.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, caller. Well, Val, there you
You're
go.
welcome.
I think the caller talks about the angst that people feel just having to deal with him. I wrote a column this afternoon, and you can find it on the deal with edclark.com. I write one every day. And I talked about the angst that I feel just writing about him. It's like, really? Something else? You could literally write something every day. And there is a sort of evil genius to him. He's able to move the discussion so that you don't, it's like, look over here, and people turn and look over there and miss sight of what's going on. Talk about that sort of evil genius of Donald Trump and his ability to get people off balance and off focus.
Well, unfortunately, we're having that done at a very bad time, Ed. And I say unfortunately because progressives, liberals, the Democratic Party, whatever you want to call them, we need to be focusing on something else now. The number one has to be GOTV, or getting out the vote. We really have to marshal and amass our people next week, or sometime between now and next week. And that's critically important. Most people are not affiliated with media outlets, meaning that they're not benefiting from the craziness that Trump spews out. There are only two entities that's benefiting from that. Donald Trump himself, because it's helping him to keep in contact with his base and keep his agenda going, and the media, which is making fun. I can't wait until we can monetize Donald Trump's effect on the media and how much money they have made and are still making off of covering this guy 24/7. They are getting super rich doing this. So there are only two people that are benefiting from this. And I love what the caller called him. If you notice, the caller called him 45. Never called him Mr.
Right.
President. Trying to call him 45. I like that. But this guy never, ever seems to care about what's going on in America, what the protocol is for the United States of America's presidential behavior. None of that. He cares nothing about that. He cares about making money. He cares about being right. He cares about being powerful and those kinds of things. And we are, we're fed up with it. Early on, Ed, on the show that you and I host every other week, we love to give our callers an opportunity to call in and vent about the president and what he's done and what he didn't do. And can you believe this and can you believe that? Because you need to do that. You need to get that. You can't hold it in. You need to do that. And we are very pleased that we could use our facilities to allow that venting from our listeners and our viewers. But at some point, action is required. At some point, stop ventilating. You got to go do something. Faith without, somebody used to say.
Right. So is there like a law of diminishing returns, though, with again, expressing the angst at some point? Like you said, you just got to get up and do something. And like I mentioned earlier, if you don't vote, you really don't have any dog in the fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So in the time we have remaining here, I want to shift focus a little bit. Obviously we couldn't go through this program without talking about those four main issues. Pittsburgh, Jeffersontown, Kentucky, the bomber who was could have killed people all over the country, and then finally this birthright citizenship thing in the 14th Amendment. Let's bring it a little bit closer to home. And are there any races that we should pay close attention to? Not only here in North Carolina where we are, but anywhere. What races do you think there's a chance that some surprises could happen? And then really, do the Democrats fare any better after what's happened in the last week?
3 gubernatorial races bear watching. And I'll do them starting with the most northern race and work my way down. In the state of Maryland, we have a gentleman that was head of the NAACP, the Urban League, and I think he was mayor of New Orleans at one time. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Jealous. Ben Jealous is running for governor of Maryland. And he's behind in the polls at this time, but Maryland has a very large African American population, and I will not be surprised if he does well in that particular race. The outcome. Moving down further south, we take a look at in North Carolina. We have Linda Coleman, who is running for the 2nd congressional district, and that will be a mega victory for Democrats if she can pull that off. She's neck and neck with the incumbent Republican Holden right now, and right now it looks pretty good for her if there's a high African American turnout. Moving on down to Georgia, where we have Stacey Abrams, African American female, running for governor of that particular state. She is running against a gentleman by the name of Kemp, who is the current Secretary of State for the state of Georgia. And most people would know that one of the responsibilities of the Secretary of State is to certify the election results. So if there's any shenanigans or thought of shenanigans being done, he is the one making the decision for his own race, which to me is not good. He shouldn't be doing that. I mean, if you're going to allow that, then Ed, I want you to go and get all the money you can and put on me to beat LeBron James in one-on-one basketball if you will allow me to be the referee, because I'm sure I could do that. But seriously speaking, getting back to the final race I wanted to talk about is a gentleman by the name of, he was the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida. And Gillum is his last name. And he is very articulate, an African-American male, very articulate, surprised a lot of people in the primary, Democratic primary. They didn't think he had a chance to win. And he's doing very well in the polls now. Not a blowout or anything like that, but he has a manageable lead. So turnout is going to determine what goes on here. Those 4 races I'm watching. There are other important races around the country. Make no mistake about it. Each and every seat in the House of Representatives at the federal level is up for contest here. And we don't know how that's going to come out yet. The Democrats hoping to take back the House. 1/3 of the Senate, U.S. Senate, is up for re-election right now. And there are a lot of races in other denominations at the state level, state houses, state Senate, and the like, gubernatorial races and the like. So there are a lot of important races. I just mentioned 4, but that doesn't mean that there aren't many others.
Yeah, Val, we got about a minute left here, and I always ask you before we leave to give us a book recommendation. What book are you reading this week, or a book that you can think of that would help us process some of what we've had to go through this week?
The same book I've been reading last week, and I wanted to come back to that again because I misspoke. And I'm glad you gave me this opportunity to sort of clean something up. The book is by Carol Anderson, and her book is entitled One Person, No Vote. One person, no vote. And I believe I said one man, no vote. And
Right. You need to clean that up.
I clean that up bad. I don't want all those phone calls coming into me, particularly from Carol Anderson.
Well, great. That is a book I recommend. I heard an interview with her this afternoon. Very, very insightful as to how people are not being allowed to vote, and the whole reason why that's a problem, and how it's never really been we've never been a true democracy here in America, and she explains a lot of that. So I know we're at the top of the hour, Val. Again, couldn't do it without you. Appreciate you coming in tonight, all the way from Holly Springs, North Carolina, the big city of Holly Springs. And folks, I really appreciate you guys coming in and being with us tonight. We will be back next Tuesday night on election night to do some election night coverage, to give our own spin on what's happening in North Carolina and around the country. In the meantime, do what you need to do, which is go vote. There's nothing else you can do. I appreciate the callers who called in. Hopefully, as we grow this show, more people will call and participate. You can always reach me at Fire Films on Twitter, and then you can always leave us a message on the website, thedealwithedclark.com. In the meantime, have a good evening, and we'll see you next Tuesday night.
Call Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Michelle.
Hey, Lin, are you registered to vote?
Of course. I am not throwing away my opportunity to make my voice heard this November.
If we really want our voices to be heard, we need to vote in every election, not just for president, but for every office, school board, state house, senate, all of them. Can you help me get people registered?
Okay, I'm already on it.
Well, keep up the good work.
Let's see who else we can get on this.
Yo, Lynn, what up?
Hey, Chris, we're looking to field a full team to make sure every American casts their ballot this November. It's real easy from your phone or tablet to get the info you need to vote. Also, Michelle said so.
Well, I'm on it. There's no off season for getting out to vote. Call Janelle.
No, not now. I'm registering voters. Hey, take this. 4 million Americans turn 18 this year. That's huge. And we need every last one of them to register and vote. Because let's be real. It's going to be the young people of this generation that will change the world.
It's time. Our nation requires it. Our democracy in the country we love requires our attention, voice, and participation.
When we vote, we prove that we are a democracy with a government of the people and by the people.
So every community we visit, it's important for them to know they can really make a difference if they go and vote in every election.
Absolutely.
So we're asking for your help. Help us start a conversation across America about being active participants in our most basic American responsibility, voting. Talk to your friends and family and neighbors. Tell them your hopes and dreams for your family, your community, and our country. When we all vote, we determine our future.
Hello. Still there?
Yeah, man. Can you see?